American policymakers deserve to have a complete and comprehensive picture of what is occurring in Afghanistan.
Real quick, yeah.
I believe you voted against that amendment. I mean, do you think that we should be studying the humanitarian suffering there?
I mean, I think we should study the humanitarian suffering everywhere. Obviously, the humanitarian suffering all over this planet, right? I'm not in favor of giving money that I'm pretty confident will end up in the hands of the Taliban.
Congresswoman, can I ask you a question about Afghanistan? Not about Afghanistan?
What about the shameful withdrawal?
Well, that's a pretty big deal too.
Members that were killed, about the drone strike that killed many.
Actually, about the millions of children that were starving.
Why don't you go talk to Biden?
I think that matters too, and it's the Biden administration that's doing this.
We're talking about the precipice of a massive famine, or one that's going on, and we have a responsibility to make sure that that our foreign policy doesn't contribute to that.
Okay, so there was a lot going on in that video, and we're gonna dive into it. If you'd like to see more of those interviews that were conducted by reporters for The Intercept, definitely go check out their coverage of this topic. But the video began with Representative Pramila Jayapal starting up a vote for an amendment that would look into the humanitarian consequences, the suffering that would be caused by the US effectively stealing $7 billion from Afghanistan. What effect would that have on this country that is already in an incredibly rough state in a million different ways and is on the precipice of an absolutely massive famine? So you saw there, Jordan, that some, I believe it was Ronnie Jackson and Lauren Boebert, no interest. Not only did they all vote against the amendment, which would just study the likely impacts of doing this. Every single Republican voted against it, joined by 44 House Democrats, so isn't that fun? They didn't care. AOC seemed to care a little bit, but that amendment did fail. We are not going to study the impact of us stealing those $7 billion.
John, this is a perfect example of kind of the bipartisan jingoism in our foreign policy. Well, I mean, why would they care? It's not directly affecting them. And the way they see others around the world, and especially in the Middle East, they see them, innocent people, women, children, whatever, people who have no connection to any sort of conflict, they see them as subhuman. So when you have that kind of jingoism in your foreign policy, it's so easy to dismiss the suffering that you and your military have caused around the world. I mean, this is the seizure. Like, but first they froze all this money, but through sanctions and restrictions on what the bank can do, and then they took half of it, and then they tried to frame it as some like patriotic like 9/11 victims compensation thing. Well, Afghanistan weren't, the government of Afghanistan was not the perpetrators of 9/11. If you really wanted to go after somebody, you go after the Saudis, but we're still arming them and we're supporting their air force in their war against Yemen, which is causing a famine and the worst human rights disaster in the world in Yemen. So like, just look throughout the region, look what we're inflicting around that region. These people don't care. It's good. Like Boebert was trying to take a shot at Biden for the withdrawal, the messy withdrawal, and different drone strikes. But at the end of the day, those are just hollow talking points. Because if you really cared about people there, you would want to do this.
Yeah, 100%. And we're going to engage with those talking points. Obviously, I agree with you about the overall consequences of this. This is not our money to steal, and pretending, and we'll get into why it's a little bit pretending to give it to people we feel bad for, the families of victims of 9/11. That doesn't make theft right. Like if you steal a bunch of money and then you give it to orphans, no, it's still, you shouldn't have done the theft. Also, you're rich, you could have done the charity part without the theft. Let's not forget that. But really fast, I want to engage with what they said in that video. So again, I believe it was Ronnie Jackson was like, there's humanitarian stuff all over, whatever. Okay, but you're pretending as if you're equally bothered by all of it. You're not proposing we study other effects of foreign policy. You're literally saying let's not do anything. So that's weird. Also saying I'm not going to give any money that could fall into the hands of the Taliban. Well, that is an interesting way to think about whether you should transfer money to someone. I personally think then I shouldn't pay my taxes because apparently a significant percentage of it is going to go to military contractors. And you might say, well, hey, John, that's not fair. I mean, sure, you may not approve of this money being turned into weapons, but at least it's not going to the Taliban. I don't know, when the Taliban took over, they took a lot of our weapons. Some of those weapons were bought with taxes I've paid over the years. Maybe I should have withheld those taxes. After all, I don't want that money going to the Taliban, do I? But really fast, Boebert too. Boebert, she memorized a couple talking points and she deployed them again to stop questions about whether we should be like like open allies effectively in causing more suffering and starvation in Afghanistan. She said, "Oh, what are you gonna ask me about? The shameful withdrawal, the 13 service members who died, the 10 innocents who died in a drone strike. Those are things that she cares about, she would have you believe. Or are they? So did she not want us to withdraw? Should we stay forever? And if so, how can you be that bothered by the service members that died in an attack by the Taliban? You're saying we shouldn't have withdrawn, we should have stayed there. There would have been more attacks, more service members would have died. Do you not want us to deploy our service members overseas and leave them for literally decades in harm's way if, after all, you're so bothered by them dying? And what about the 10 innocents that died in drone strikes? I looked into it. Those weren't the first innocents that have died in drone strikes, and they certainly won't be the last. So, Boebert, are you proposing that we end indiscriminate drone strikes? Were you a big critic of the massive increase in drone strikes that happened under the Trump administration? Did anything that you said actually have a relationship to a real position that you hold or action that you might take in the future? But no, it was to stop some questions, Jordan, just to stop some questions.
Exactly. It was totally devoid of substance. I mean, the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction had been warning for months that the preparation for withdrawal was going to lead to the exact scenario that played out. And if you wanted to alleviate even the slightest amount of suffering, one way to do that would be to advocate for refugee resettlement here. Look, it's the least we could do. We destabilized their entire country for decades. Like, that's all you need to do. It's a minimal cost. It's just the good thing to do after we just destroyed their homes, killed hundreds of thousands of people there. But no, that's not what they want. None of the Republicans wanted that because it just that wouldn't align with their xenophobia. I mean, just to put things in perspective, this $3.5 billion that we've taken from them to give to 9/11 victims. Just yesterday, the Biden administration requested a new military budget of $770 billion for 1 year. 1 year. And they're concerned about $3.5 billion. Like you said, we're rich, we can afford that. So why aren't we just already paying to support 9/11 victims?
Yeah.
Like, this is something they actually had to fight for. There was a very long, drawn out and highly publicized campaign, in part led by Jon Stewart, to get compensation for people who were suffering from long-term health consequences and had survived 9/11. That's the way to do it. Fund them directly. Don't take from another country that had nothing to do with 9/11.
Exactly. Yeah. When you're going to fund, so they increased our military budget from last year by far more than $7 billion.
17 billion.
17 billion more dollars. We're one war down since last year. How is the budget going up? Always going up. Weird how that works. But yeah, I agree. Now, the Biden administration is receiving a lot of pressure from both inside and outside of the United States to not they already took the $7 billion, or they're in the process of trying to divvy it out. Maybe there is still time for that to be stopped.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.